Dobře, hele, no a kolik lidí tak nějak jako, nebo já jsem si říkal, že 5 minut počkáme, ale nevím, jak v jakém modu počkat, nebo jak kolik lidí se hlásí, nebo kdy začít. Mhm. 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 OK.
Jinak Vítku, seš slyšet, jo? Máš zapnutý mikrofon, jak telefonuješ.
Tomáši?
Ano.
Tak máš vypnutý mikrofon, ale říkali jsme si, že 5 minut počkáme ještě na to, že Viktor bude vlastně postupně přijímat lidi, ale teď už jsme vidět, jako jo, jsme online.
A ty mě neslyšíš?
Mikrofon.
Tak už tě slyšíme, Tomáši, je to v pořádku?
Jo, slyšíme se. Do you hear me?
Vítám mezi náma 15 lidí nových.
Hello, Benin, hi.
Hello.
Slyšíme se? Do you hear me, Victor?
So the plan is we are now online, but we are slowly waiting that people connect. So I think we will start in 5 minutes maximum.
So
it's all right.
We are online. So at this time we are online.
Do you hear me, Victor? So the plan is we are now online, but we are slowly waiting that people connect. So I think we will start in.
Just one more test. Do you hear me? Because I'm not sure. Yeah, perfect.
Tomáši?
Ano? Ano, víte? Víte? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a Vít asking me. Vít, do you hear me? Vít? Víte?
Nefunguje zvuk, člověče.
Ale oni mě slyšejí a já tě slyším. Koukni.
Já tě neslyším, člověče.
Janos, Benjamin, they
Yes.
signalized me that they are hearing me.
Aha, tak já tě neslyším.
Clemens also waving.
Aha, tak.
So it's up to you. It's on your. So you don't hear me, eh? Vít.
No.
So everyone's.
Promiň, já nemám zapnutý. Zkus. No.
Oh, it's your fault. Perfect. So we are almost prepared, yeah?
Wait, Marina is writing. So we kindly ask the visitors to wait for 2 more minutes. The panelists are preparing to start in 2 minutes, and we are still having some small technical issues with Marina Grznic, who actually writes in the chat, but we cannot see her. And okay, it seems going on.
I see.
Oh, it's strange.
Vítku, jenom instrukce pro Marinu. Ona pravděpodobně vlastně jako kliknula na link jako attendee. Jo? Prosím instruovat, že se má odhlásit a přihlásit linkem, který jsem jí poslal.
A kam jsi to poslal?
Vít?
Já jsem teď vzal Marinu mezi panelisty, že jsem ji vytáhl z attendees a dal jsem ji mezi panelisty, takže tato situace už je vyřešena.
Now I see you. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
It was on
We
your
hear you.
side. Yes, it was on your side, some technical troubles.
Nice to hear you. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Clemens. Hi, Janos.
Hello, hello.
Yeah. We didn't see for a long, Janos, no? And Clemens, quite some
Yes.
years. I'm more connected with Janos because I'm on the same list, so we read each other on the net time. But Clemens, we didn't see each other for quite a long.
I can also introduce Benjamin Meyer-Kramer, with whom I did this video. You will see Marina, Benjamin, Janos. I don't know. Hi.
Hi.
Hello to everyone.
Yeah. And just to briefly, my name is Tomáš Vaněk, and I am a rector of Academy of Fine Arts. So Vít will introduce me, but it's really nice to see you and hear you again. Yeah.
I have to tell that Vít's computer has crashed, so he's trying to restart the session. So please be patient. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Vít is lost. So we are awaiting for Vít. So hope.
It's almost like meeting in physical space. People get lost.
Yeah.
They crash.
Hello, good evening. I'm very sorry. I opened already. I spoke for 5 minutes, but nobody could hear me. So I can repeat it again. So welcome. I would like first welcome all the attendees that we don't see right now. We see participants on the top line, and the attendees are not part of the image we have on the screen. I'm very happy that we can, regardless the problems and regardless impossibility to meet, we can still go on and realize this symposium titled Forming the Reformed. I will give you a very short guide through this evening, through this afternoon. And it starts with a welcome speech of Rector of Fine Arts Academy in Prague, Tomáš Vaněk, that is in between of us. Then I will have a few remarks to the subject, to the topic of the symposium, and then there will be a short informal discussion of the participants, of 5 participants that you can see here. And after this discussion that will last something like 20-30 minutes, we will broadcast their video contributions, which last each of them approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So this is briefly the program of this evening. So let's start with an opening, and I would like to give a floor to Tomáš Vaněk.
We thank you, dear symposium participants, dear guests. I would like to warmly welcome you to this online space, which we have recently been inhabiting and sharing more and more. We have come together in order to discuss the subject of art education, not only at the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague, which is organizing this symposium, but also more broadly within the expansive institutional field of art education and in our thinking in general. The symposium title, Reforming the Reformed, was inspired by the specific situation and experience of our institution. Since the post-revolutionary 90s, when Professor Knížák implemented many changes at AVU, means Academy of Fine Arts in Prague, and invited new teachers to come to our school, this period has been central to AVU's modern reforms. The fact is that no other school of higher education in our region underwent such radical changes as AVU did in 1989 and 1990. It has been 31 years since that time. The world has fundamentally changed and continues to change, and we are participating in and following all these changes, asking ourselves how to follow up on them in contemporary art and education. Students have fundamentally different requirements when it comes to the manner and intensity of passing on knowledge and experience. Teachers demand different support for their teaching activities and more room for original teaching approaches. Staff are increasingly invited in and included into the artistic thinking of the school and of society, and this thinking defines the school's personality as such. I speak from personal experience. I studied at AVU in the 90s, began teaching here more than 10 years ago and have guided it as a rector for 7 years. This experience with the institutional world and the world outside the school has produced a need to repeatedly reflect on relationship, process, and positions, and on possibilities for their reconfiguration so that we can face the pressure of synthetic creativity coming from many areas of social and political life. If I were to say which questions have recently occupied me the most, as a teacher and rector of AVU, then I would focus on these three. The first question is how to structure the teaching of artistic practice and theory in fine art differently than according to discipline. By discipline, I mean painting, sculpture, the graphic arts, intermedia art, and new media. The second one, how to configure a system of teaching activities based on the principle of the broad sharing of personal skills and experiences. Means how to be mutually beneficial during artistic development. And third one, how to work with the concept of talent, which is not easy to define as an evaluation criterion. Does this mean that people who were accepted to a school on the basis of talent are guaranteed to have it during their entire period of study and afterwards as well? So I am interested in the answers to these questions and also in other subjects that don't directly answer my questions, but that offer new vantage points from which these issues may be approached. I am looking forward to your presentation, to short discussion, and to the final picture that our symposium, Reforming the Reformed, will create. So may everybody find it time well spent, and I wish you all a good afternoon in good health and strength. Thank you. And now I'm giving the words back to Pete and ask him to continue. So, Pete.
Thank you, Tomáš. Thank you to Tomáš Vaněk for his introduction. I would like to follow a little bit the line of his speech because he recalled the connection between the reflections on how to teach art that took place on the school ground last year. The call for reflection posed by this symposium extends a little bit this question to very different type of institutions. On the one hand, we invited you participants from classical academies, stone schools, classical educational institutions, and on the other hand, we find really important also to include in the debate participants from self-organized and grassroots artistic educational groups and collectives. Just a small historical reflection on these two groups of institutions. I think we should not forget today that academies of art started in the Renaissance times and they were patronaged by the kings or the aristocratic families. And they actually forced or tried to be public universities even in the time of Renaissance, but they were refused as not being complete as universities are, but being really focused on more manual and more skill-based practice than classical universities. On the other hand, the grassroots organizations historically started from the, let's say, opposite historical movements and activities. They started from the reformations, from reforms, sometimes even very radical or revolutionary reforms. We can just remind the most famous 20th century reformistic pedagogies, Waldorf pedagogies, or critical pedagogies, or radical pedagogies like Paulo Freire or Ivan Illich and many others, who were actually related to deeper changes in the view on the function of education in society, and thus politically changed the view of came from a change of view on the functioning of society as such. I think only looking at all the contribution will show us what we can deduce from this comparison of stone schools and grassroots initiatives. Of course, we are also interested to kind of reflect and kind of think about the way how these classical academies are organized. Because if one looks at them further, closer, we can see that there are very different systems. Major difference could be that there is a master system that is based on unique individuality of an artist that transfer his or her knowledge and capacity and passion to art to the students. On the other hand, there are more collective or structure or media-based curricula that these academies are today proposing. Then the second point of this symposia is also to bring together or to bring in relation the changes and so to say transformation in artistic practices in the last 50 years. Most namely, the brief of the symposium is mentioning fluxus and conceptual art on the one hand, and on the second hand, certain revolution of relation of art and theory. What these two modes of new artistic practices, how they influence actually the art education, whether the school or the schools that kind of reflect on fluxus and conceptual art are no longer requiring cultivation of certain craftsmanship, and it doesn't only touches, it touches all media actually, not only particular media, but all media, which used to be in the past the primary aim of the art academies. The second wave of the reform maybe, or of this influence of artistic practices on the university involved the gradual merge of contemporary theory, which can be, here we can mention institutional critique, gender theory, post-colonial theory, theory of moving image, post-human theory, global art history, etc. And how this new hybrid concept of theoretical art or intermedia art or post-media art is influencing the educational institution. There could be even a hypothesis that that actually this new theoretical model of art didn't come from the practice to the educational system, but maybe it can be the opposite result, that it's a kind of product of new education that influences actually the practice. So these are just few lines of thoughts that kind of crossed our minds when we were putting together, organizing the symposia and inviting you. Just to tell maybe one organizational detail, one organizational thing, that actually this is the first afternoon or first evening, and the symposium will continue every Thursday at 4 o'clock with the new video contributions and discussions with all following participants that are listed in the invitation. And now I would be very happy to kind of open up a discussion. Actually, the idea, we call it rather a hangout or a kind of informal discussion. So I have some questions, but first I would like to say that I'm very happy that we could all gather. Of course, it's not a real substitution of a real meeting, but in the same time, this informality, if it's possible, could replace a little bit something like a discussion, normal discussion that we would have actually at a coffee table. So first question, I have two questions, which are basically very, very simple. The first question is for you participants, the first question would be actually, when we talk on a regular symposia, we deliver our talk and then we leave the floor, and very often it happened to me, or I suppose that we have this the same, that we think, yeah, I forgot to say something very important. And my first question would be whether you forgot to say something very important in your video contribution. I know that it's very different, right? Because you could prepare it, you write down the notes, etc. But anyhow, I would ask this first question: if you have some kind of annex or some adding to the video contribution that you sent, or maybe some remarks about the media also. You know, on which extent is it sensible to deliver a contribution by a video? So this is first question that I just throw on the floor. And please don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, if no one objects, I would just make one short remark. Hi, I'm Benjamin. Together with Clemens, I teach at the Fine Arts Academy in Leipzig. And we produced this little video that we will all see together. And I just wanted to add one, I mean, there's hundreds of things that could be added, of course, but there's just to say one thing, what I was already thinking about while doing it, and what I was then thinking again when I watched the result, is that in terms of public institutions, but also art education, I think it would have been good to add the question of diversity. It is not a coincidence that two white male dudes of more or less the same age represent the Academy of Fine Arts in Leipzig in this video. And I think it is not only because it is mandatory from the Ministry of Culture's point of view that we develop some sort of attitude towards the question of diversity, but also for our own political understanding of what we feel art education should contain. It would be good to add to the video some sort of a self-reflection, or maybe even institutional self-criticism, that in that respect, there is something to be done at our academy. I'm aware that we are not the only academy which has that problem, but this is something that I would add to the video if there was a sequel to it.
But Benjamin, you were mentioning in the video one thing that is very unique at Leipzig, which is this special program for migrants that the academy is running, right? Is it?
Yes.
Can you maybe say a few words about it? Because I think it's quite. Also, I know that it exists in Vienna, but yes, it's something that I find it very interesting and would like to know more about it if possible.
Yeah. There's more. There's also other art academies in Germany who have similar programs, like Foundation Class in Berlin-Weißensee. Also, Hamburg has a similar program. And what we did at HGB, I think 4 years ago, I think late 2015 or 16, we were wondering in how far we could react to the situation that more and more people who came to Germany as refugees were also, of course, from that background, having studied art, design, or related subjects in the countries where they came from. And what we then came up with is a structure which allows them to take language courses, because this is just something that people need to go through in order to to acquire a better, a safer status to also remain in Germany, ideally. And which is also important for them to become more integrated in the, not only the job market, but also in the art scene over here. And it is also meant to prepare them to study at our academy, to become fully enrolled students in this 2-year process. So it took quite some time to establish that. Now we have established it. It is also supported by the Ministry of Culture. And of course, at the same time, it is something that is targeted by members of the parliament from the right-wing party for obvious reasons, but I'm quite happy that we were able to install it, and we are now also rethinking it because less and less refugees actually arrive in Germany. But so far it has been running, and I think it still makes a lot of sense and it works. But maybe Clemens can add to that.
Yeah, it's also in connection to other programs in Germany in art academies, especially some are fitting well together, like there are students who have been in the foundation class in Weißensee and Berlin, and then come to Berlin, to Leipzig, and in Leipzig they are able then to step into the like normal diploma study program. So we are quite happy about it, and it's also quite successful for some of the students who get recognition, success, and can get a diploma at the end, probably. And so what I just wanted to, this is something that is kind of interesting because it's a new thing. And I think what I would add, if I would have forgotten something, and there's a lot, that I invite the possibilities of founding something from scratch. So when you're in an institution and you're studying or you're teaching, suddenly in like this traditional art academy, you sometimes just think, what if we could do everything from scratch and build up a new school, you know? So, I mean, of course, there are things which are good that they are already built and structured, but of course, there's always this great moment of founding something from scratch. That is, I miss sometimes this possibility.
Maybe I can go on with the first question and connect in a certain way to what was said. Maybe very briefly, I will not change radically what I said, maybe just the tone, because I think it will be much more productive if we could now discuss and not record ourselves, but onto the questions answer and also react to what is said, because this gives another dynamic, and the things are much more in relations to the other, also in reflection. This, I think, will be something that I was thinking, because it's really monotone to talk to a screen and talk in a vacuum, as it said. But okay, I have maybe 2 points that I would like to emphasize. In Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, We have already this possibility to include refugees, but I don't think that a preparation period it's actually a generous period, because it's years of passing for those people who actually has no legal structure. They stay there, but on a very precarious foundation, and that means that we are stealing more time of their life. It will be more important for the whole institutions of the universities in general to rethink also for the basis of those who study, how they can get their context in terms of papers and everything regulated, and not to be in the constant limbo and pressure that is actually chasing them, also regarding money, regarding many possibilities. This will be my first point. So we actually can take students, they study with us, but then we see that the repressive apparatuses of the state is deciding regarding the papers, and this is something that is going on through the whole European Union, and it's horrifying, and it's a pure violence. And so our paternalism, I think, it's just rhetorical, because we don't give what it's necessary to be given. That means a security and also a possibility of life, and not just some kind of a shelter, because this is what they want. And the second point, I think, regarding the diversity, that it will be, I talk about the regime of whiteness. And this means that it's a system in the education throughout Europe that is completely white, and it's not taking into account not the refugees, but not taking into account the myriad of fantastically educated academics that are coming from different backgrounds, but are actually born and formed citizens of Europe, and they are not employed and given possibilities. And I think this is one of the biggest problems of our incapacity as epistemological space to even deliver something new, and also to take and to open the possibility of the institution. This, I think, it's the second very dangerous point of the institutions in the European context, and it's rarely changed. So it's not just that white men and then white women are together, women less, but mostly white men. But the worst thing is that all these educated citizens in this really versified European space are not given the chance, because of racism, because of structural inequality, because of discrimination that is completely out of any kind of historical weight. It's just what we can see all around. They are not given the possibility actually to teach and to distribute their knowledges, and actually to give a path to a future of the European space. And this, I think, it's one or the second or parallel a big problem. So maybe to finish, if I could rethink something what I said, I will even more politicized all the talks about the institutions of universities, and also connect this directly with the capitalist system, and also directly with what we see recently with this pathological and psychotic people, men, white men, who are in general in Europe taking and deciding of any kind of politics that is not a politics but is a criminal act. So this is what I will reinforce. I was actually too soft, and this is because we were not all together so I could not react, but I had to speak to the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. You saw all these white male figures now on the screen, and it reminded you the situation. So maybe I would ask Hafiz and Oti, who are actually representing this grassroots school activity that they really created on their own. If they could say a little bit, I would be curious to listen a little bit. What is your relation to the official education in Indonesia, in Jakarta? What forced you to start an art school, actually? Could you tell us? Microphone, Hafiz, microphone.
Yes, thank you, Fit. My name is Hafiz. So actually, we start this alternative education about art and media. Actually, just response after the Reformation of Indonesia in 1998. So it's like how to react the situation during the times. It's not only about the teaching the art and media to the student, but it's also about the to capture and gathering, being together, to think what we can do for this after the Reformation, after the military step down. So when we started this alternative education, we started from discussion group. Actually, it's a really small group, and then it's really organic way of discussion. But and then yeah, after the 17th years, yeah, of course, it become quite many hundreds participants, students, participants in Forum Lenteng. So we, of course, we have sometimes we have relations with the art school. I sometimes I give a lecture in our art school also, but not full time. But yeah, give it a highlight about what happened in grassroots, what happened in informal strategy in teaching about art and media. So I think that's it. Fit about Forum Lenteng.
Yeah. For me, what was fascinating while I was visiting you and your students were the methods, because it reminded me so much like Bauhaus. You know, for me, I told you it's like Indonesian Bauhaus that is built it up from the scratch, but suddenly using the methods of Bauhaus education much more than the methods of classical art education that are kind of conserved at the Academy of Fine Arts in Jakarta.
Yes, it's like the Bauhaus method. It's like how to put the idea about the form, actually, to give a form itself. But in other way, we put together in organic approach. So, and also we built some platform that all the students can apply the strategy to connect between the formal, the structural method, and the organic method. So I think it's combinations, like the like you said, the Bauhaus strategy. It's like one of method, actually. It's more like approaching what is a formal, what is an aesthetic way of thinking, and but also, of course, we have roots also in the context of the way of to see the aesthetic form in context of Indonesia. So it's combinations. But for us, the formal, like you say, that the Bauhaus form, it's more like to put the basic strategy to start to digging deep about the experimentations of visual language, what that student want to approach. So it's not only about the school, like the school of form, but more about the method of us, how to build the construct, and also being part of visual phenomena in the basic way. So, thank you.
Thank you. Someone else wants to react on this question?
Okay, maybe it's me. So, hello everyone. It's a pity that we cannot be together in flesh in Prague. So your question was an excellent question. What is I didn't say. So my answer is rather simple. I sent a short document to you, and you can distribute it to anyone who is interested, with some texts and links concerning my my video talk, because it was a little bit difficult to keep this 50 minutes limitation, and I thought that maybe you could be interested in some further aspects. The other thing I would like to say that maybe I'm a little bit, my position is a little bit different than yours, because I wouldn't say that I represent the Academy of Fine Arts of Budapest or the University of Fine Arts of Budapest. I can say I can represent only the intermedia faculty of this university. The university itself is a classical art academy with all of those classical faculties. And I don't really remember how deep I explained it in this video contribution, the story of our department, but it's a kind of a parallel with the Prague Academy, with one difference, that Milan Knížák was very radical, and in our case the students were very radical, because in 89-90 nothing has happened in the art academy. So the whole country was boiling, and the political changes were in progress since the mid-80s. You can imagine, maybe you remember, but nothing has happened in the art school. And the most surprising thing, that an ultra conservative, very real party sculptor was the dean, the rector of the school, and the students made a revolt. It's a very well-known story, and they wanted to have new teachers, new professors, because the generation of the artists who were active in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, they weren't simply allowed. I mean, physically weren't allowed to enter the art academy. I know it very well because I studied there. I was kicked out after 4 years. no problem. I have my degree. And it was a very interesting situation because most of the invited artists were established elder artists with a certain reference past, and two people were somehow, let's say, at the end of the list. Miklos Peternak, an art historian who dealt with media art, photography, film, experimental film, and myself. We worked together very closely. We were friends since the early 80s, and we did lots of things together. Today, I would say that we made a series of lecture performances in the mid-80s, and somehow we were invited, like people who can do something with media art, etc. And the story follows that we decided not to join to any existing department of the school, and we established a new department. And it was a very, a kind of radical decision, because it wasn't sure at all that we could get along with this. I mean, we get through with this project. The famous art historian László Becker, who was the senior art historian of East European art in general and a very well-known name, he wanted to establish an interdisciplinary faculty, and he didn't get a permission in 90. It's totally absurd. And the most absurd is that 20 years after, the University of Fine Arts of Budapest established a so-called curatorial studies faculty with the very same program what László Becker wrote in 90. And László Becker teaches there as a professor emeritus. So it's okay. So basically, I wanted to say just this, and I hope very much that I could explain some other things in this video talk. And anyway, so
yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you very much, János. So I think we somehow we could talk longer, of course, but somehow I think we reached this limit of 30 minutes, and I think what is substantial are your contributions that now we will broadcast one after the other, and also they will become an archive in the future, so people can also visit them and watch them online in the archive. But still, I think it's of course nicer to watch them now. So I would like to thank you very much to contribute first and to take part in this improvised talk online. And we will start to screen your contributions. You can stay connected, you can disconnect as you want. Just I would like to kindly ask you to unmute yourself. I will do the same, and also to stop the video. I think it's somehow technically, I was told that it's a better solution if we all stop video and unmute ourselves. But still, you can watch, of course. And first, I will always introduce orally or by talking the contributors, and then my colleague will play the videos. So the first contribution was conceived by two participants, Professor Clemens von Wedermayer and Professor Dr. Benjamin Meir Kramer. Clemens Wedermayer was born in 1974 in Germany and studied photography and media in Bielefeld and fine arts at the Academy of Visual Arts in Leipzig. where he now holds a professorship for media art, expanded cinema. As a filmmaker and artist, he lives in Berlin. His films and complex video installation embrace several storylines and points of view. His works explore the personal and collective history of the 20th century, as well as the power and control structures of the present. Here, I would mention a few solo exhibitions of Clemens von Wedermeyer from Gallery for Contemporary Art in Leipzig in 2019, 2016 Neuberlinische Kunstverein, 2015 Kunsthalle Hamburg, and selection of group exhibitions, Chicago Architecture Biennial 2019, Riga Biennial 2019, 66 Berlin International Film Festival 2012, Documenta 13 in 2007. And Multiplex Direction in Art, MoMA, New York, 2007. His colleague that conceived the video together with Clemens, Benjamin Meyer-Kramer, is Vice Dean and Professor of Cultures of the Curatorial at the same Academy of Fine Arts in Leipzig. After studying comparative literature and history in Tübingen, New York, and Berlin, he co-founded the scenography agency Schweiz in 2001 and was awarded by PhD in 2007. Before joining the school in Leipzig in 2011, he received a postdoc grant from Freie Universität in Berlin and collaborated with the artist Willem de Rooij. Together with Clemens von Wedermeyer, he curated the exhibitions Fremd in 2016 at the Ethnological Museum in Leipzig. His main research areas are epistemology and methodology of artistic and curatorial practice, issues of presentation and representation, as well as the history of institutional critique. He is co-editor of 4-volume anthology Cultures of the Curatorial that is published by Sternberg Press in Berlin, and he published a monography on Detroit, as well as 3-volume publication Intolerance together with Willem de Rooij. So I would like to ask my colleague that will now show the first contribution.
First of all, hello to everyone. I'm Clemens von Wedermeyer, and I invited Benjamin Meyer-Kramer, my colleague at the school in Leipzig, to speak together, as we both have slightly different perspectives that overlap.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for listening to this program. I'm trying to picture some sort of audience, which is a weird situation, sitting at home at my desk. But I do hope that at one point in the not so far future, we will be able to actually have a conversation about the topics raised by the initiators of this conference, for which I'm very grateful. Thank you, Clemens, for the invitation to have this slightly virtual dialogue under the conditions of a semi-lockdown over here in Berlin.
First thing I would have to stress is that when we ask what teaching and learning at an art school should be like, I would have to be a student. I have studied at 2 art schools, and now I'm a professor at the same school where I've studied. Nearly 20 years ago, I was looking for a way out of the institution as a student, taking advantage of the opportunities it offered me studying within. My degree at the university was also a liberation from an education that was repeatedly, perhaps even constantly, criticized. What I suppressed or was not interested in back then as a student was how this institution functioned. But what it does not or could not offer strikes me back today as a teacher. What drove me back then was to leave the institution in order to move forward as a young artist or filmmaker. Now that I'm a teacher here, I'm trying for the first time to walk in, understand and change it, perhaps. But then as now, the only way to get in or out of this institution is, I think, to have a leg to stand on somewhere else as well. What I would like to stress also after this beginning is that we have to see the institution from the student's perspective. How talented or capable the individual person is a completely different question. The central question is how the work of these individual students is supported, cared for, and helped by a group that includes fellow students and teachers, professors, and also the interested public. Benjamin, I invited you to talk also because you have a multiple perspective.
As you suggested, I'll start by sketching my perspective on the Art Academy. I studied in the field of humanities at several universities and did my PhD in comparative literature. After that, I moved on to working in a gallery, co-founded an agency for exhibition design, did some curating, worked together with the artist Willem de Rooij for several years, and finally ended up at the Academy of Fine Arts, Leipzig, about 9 years ago. I started at the Academy as a research assistant and lecturer in the MA program Cultures of the Curatorial, which I have been running with Beatrice von Bismarck for the past years. I was appointed as professor 3 years ago at the Academy, where I also teach theory seminars for the students of all the art departments. Due to the privilege of not having introduced a BA-MA system, our art students graduate with a diploma instead of doing an MA. This provides much more freedom in terms of curriculum, teaching formats, and evaluation. Since on top of that we are also getting rid of grading altogether, the Academy sometimes feels like a space in which some of the current dynamics related to evaluation, credits, and numbers are less influential than in the outside world. It remains to be seen and critically discussed what the actual effects of this situation will be. Besides teaching in the only MA program at the Academy, which is the Curatorial Studies program, and in the theory department, I also serve as one of the 2 vice deans of the Academy. So my perspective is shaped by those different jobs I do at the Academy and the different functions I perform, which actually requires switching between different points of view. In case this sounds like a smooth shifting back and forth, I would like to stress that this is not the case, as those different perspectives do not correspond and sometimes even contradict each other. What has been maybe the most crucial experience of those past years is a growing sense of the complexity of what we casually call a public institution, and my involvement in such structures. The Academy is financed by tax money. The budget for the entire educational sector is negotiated and decided by the Parliament of the state of Saxony, where Leipzig is located. The Ministry of Culture, together with the Ministry of Finance, allocates our annual budget, which is then divided into several sub-budgets, some of them depending on our performance as an academy. Which means, as an institution, we are embedded in politics, and that we are dependent on the Parliament and its members. On the one hand, we have the privilege of a more or less secured budget and a number of paid jobs. But we get a concrete sense of this dependency whenever the ministries, for instance, develop new tools of evaluation which are connected with recalculating budgets and the quantity of paid jobs in our academy. The consequences of election results have become more of an issue during the past 5 years. We are, for instance, confronted with inquiries by the right-wing populist party, which target our class for artists who came to Germany as refugees. This is, of course, only the tip of the iceberg. Being a public institution has many far-reaching consequences, and I would be very interested in discussing this further at a later point. But before diving too deep into this topic, we shift perspective and Clemens will talk about his approach to teaching.
After a 2-year interdisciplinary basic study period in media art. Students come into the class for about 3 years. Some also transfer to the class from outside. Each student brings along a different, often quite special skill. The point is to bring these individual abilities into the group, to specialize them individually, to have them discover new skills. So they have to develop their own methodology, but also even their own grammar, their own semiotics, their own world. Because their own work will be something new, something that has perhaps never existed before. So the unknown, the new, is the goal. From the individual, we come to the group, because the fellow students are one of the most important factors for teaching at eye level in an art school, I think. The group, here it is called class, produces a network, a critical capacity, confronts the students with a different practice. They learn from it, and at the same time they set themselves apart. Sometimes they form gangs, develop each other further. I'm therefore a friend of the art class, which for about 2 years or 3 years produces both security and openness. Of course, group dynamics play a big role, which can be influenced by pedagogical concepts and projects. In the class, there are individual presentations and group discussions. Guests are invited, you meet other classes, go on excursions, you talk about theory seminars you're attending, plan projects or exhibitions together, disappear abroad and come back to get your diploma. There are crises, you change classes, try your luck elsewhere, and do as many projects as possible, which eventually lead you out of the close relationship between your fellow students and the professor. Art education strives from the individual to the group to finally leave the institution. The goal is to leave the institution and not only seek the unknown, but to dare to produce it yourself. Therefore, the Art Academy must educate to become a memory itself. My class is called Expanded Cinema, and this subject also has been a direction in American art teaching in California. It was about leaving cinema, applying it to society. Buckminster Fuller is probably the one who is most quoted in the book Expanded Cinema by Gene Youngblood. From Fuller, we know the idea that the world must be imagined from the outside, as a spaceship. Some of the concepts of expanded cinema, which can also be seen as reform concepts for academies of the 60s, 70s, can still be referred to today. Much of expanded cinema also had to do with digitalization, the question of a network, a total network. Gene Youngblood wrote, "When we say expanded cinema, we actually mean expanded consciousness." The lines of content in my field of teaching will move more and more in the direction of artistic research, with an updated look at digital innovations in film and narratives, where we are mounting stories in digital spaces with data.
I do hope that we will manage to provide the framework at our academy and create spaces for this development Clemens just outlined. What I personally really enjoy about working at an art academy is its proximity to the contemporary surrounding world. It sounds a bit like a cliche, but I actually experience this proximity as being much more present than, for instance, at the Philosophy Institute of the university where I worked as a postdoc before joining the academy. It might be important to mention, though, that the Leipzig Art Academy has a strong focus on so-called theory and therefore a rather large theory department. Luckily, this is also appreciated by the majority of our students, and our seminars are very popular with an average of about 30 to 50 participants. One of my favorite events at HGB was a series of panel discussions we did on the issue of the relevance of art and the art of relevance. This serial event developed around discussions we had in several seminars I did at the time. One was on notions of critique, another one on representation, and a third one on post-colonial theory. The team which conceived of the event consisted of 5 students and myself, which was not only fun but also meant that the students' perspective, which Clemens mentioned earlier on, was the driving force behind this discourse. Each of the 3 panel discussions drew an audience of about 200 people, which was way beyond our expectations. For each night, we invited 3 guests working in the art field, as artists, theoreticians, gallerists, or editors. As a starting point, we took Adorno's observation that art is not a necessity, which we related to our observation that there seems to be an implicit agreement that only such art is considered relevant, which directly addresses political and social issues. Tom Hollert very appropriately called this the new relevance dogma, Relevanzdiktat in German. By questioning the relevance of art, we of course also questioned that of the Art Academy. The aim of such events was not to find conclusive answers to this question, but to create a temporary space for this discourse involving different, diverse perspectives. We recorded and transcribed all the discussions and put those materials online where they are still frequently accessed and referred to. This embeddedness in current politics and the proximity to the contemporary world are 2 aspects which play a central role for my teaching and my understanding of its relevance. Last year I did a discussion-based seminar which I called Academy of Crisis, for which we took utopian models of the Art Academy as a point of departure. We related these historical concepts to our experience of the Academy and developed ideas for communication formats and methods which we felt are missing in our institution. And there's obviously a lot that there is missing in this field. Looking at Art Academy teaching from this point might also show its huge potential of questioning the relation of so-called theory and so-called practice. It's a rather simple observation, but in comparison to how academic teaching at universities is commonly understood in Germany, the spheres of practice and theory are considered far less separated in art academies, but rather as interrelated, interdependent, and therefore connected fields. Also in our curatorial research program, we aim at developing a notion of research which comprises written discourse as well as spatial and aesthetic forms of expression and reflection. Performing another shift of perspective, Clemens will now return to our ancient institution.
This institution is 256 years old and has undergone several major changes. This institution carries its traditions, its own museum as a snail shell. In our case, these are 4 departments: painting, graphic art, painting and graphic art, and book art, graphic design. Photography was actually added around 1900 and media art in 1995. In Leipzig, of course, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the German unification in 1990 was an important turning point, which was accompanied by the students at that time and led to massive changes at the Academy a short time later, when many new colleagues from the West joined and many new experiments were made with media art, for example. So much has changed in 30 years. The changes today are sometimes met with skepticism or resignation. In 2009, the Cultures of the Curatorial Studies program was introduced, where Benjamin teaches. Benjamin also said that instead of the bachelor-master system, we still offer a diploma. About 500 students are enrolled with us. Every change here takes years, decades, and you first have to find out where you can make a lasting change. because of the rigid framework, I think students and teachers are heavily dependent on people. People develop their own teaching. They do not fill out a subject area, but develop the area itself and establish it. On the one hand, this encourages responsibility. On the other hand, this personalized teaching can produce psychological patterns. It reinforces them, gatekeeping, power games. Within the institution, it is therefore necessary to look at the human qualities in addition to the professional qualifications. When I say that the aim is to leave the institution, and the institution wants to penetrate the student's memory, this is not intended as a negative image of the institution. Rather, it is precisely our school in a region that is also very conservative, for instance, with more openness and understanding for minorities, that can paint an image for the students that could be the avant-garde of their memory. For example, we have done a project with students called Cinema on the Move, which has organized site-specific film screenings in the region, in villages and small towns in Saxony, in order to discuss with each other. A reality check and artistic work that radiates from the university. For out there is sometimes an enmity against art, and the heavy doors at the entrance of this institution and the thick walls are images in flux. Hard for the newcomers to get in, hard for some to get out. But for the art haters, it is also a sign that we do not simply surrender.
Thank you very much, Clemens von Wedermeyer and Benjamin Meyer-Kramer, for your contribution. We will follow with the next video that was made by Professor Dr. Marina Grznic, who is a philosopher, theoretician, and artist from Ljubljana, Slovenia. She serves as a professor and a research advisor. Since 2003, she is a professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, in Austria. She publishes extensively, lectures worldwide, and is involved in video productions since 1982. Here follows a selection of her books that she wrote or conceived together with Rosa Ritzenhammer, which is a book, New Feminism, Worlds of Feminism, Queer and Networking Conditions, Vienna, 2008, Marina Grznic and Shefik Tatlic, Necropolitics, Racialization and Global Capitalism, Historization of Biopolitics and Forensic of Politics, Art and Life. Lexington Books, 2014, and the last book that I will mention is Border Thinking, Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Stenberg Press from 2018. So please, could you
Who am I? I was appointed professor at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna in 2003, teaching for the Studio for Conceptual Art. But also I'm a case of transdisciplinary professor. That means I'm a doctor of philosophy, so I also monitor quite some of the future doctorants or doctors in philosophy. The Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna is a poly-structured institution that connects many fields, not only art, but also forming the professors who will teach art in other schools, offering doctorate in philosophy and philosophy of art, and also doctorates in arts, architecture, scenography. So it's actually a very important institution because of this polyvalent structure. When I started to teach in 2003, I decided to change conceptually the name, only conceptually, in Studio for Post-Conceptual Art Practices, because conceptual art was something of the history, and I wanted actually to face the 2000 and what will come on. When I started to teach and I took this position, for me this was a political decision. I think it's challenging actually to enter such an institution, but also it means that we cannot come out as innocent body and claim any innocence in the process of production of knowledge and being part of the institution of art. Now, when is the time that I'm talking for the camera? This is the 17th of November 2020, and this time is specific because it's under the sign of COVID-19. And the COVID-19, the coronavirus, affected terminally the educational system. Universities in 2020 are closed for the second time, but also other schools are closed, mostly in many parts of the European Union. All is going on virtually and digitally. This has an effect on the whole system of knowledge and on the institution of art, but also on the society. Many are stuck in the limbo. Why I'm saying this? Because we have to ask ourselves, who are those who are without a computer and the internet and have no space to work? Many, too many. Do they have food to eat properly? This is not a stupid moral question, because actually all these questions are connected with the institution of art being central to the system of reproduction. Knowledge is material and not spiritual. Your intestines works in order for us to think. So, who are those who have nothing to eat? The number is even bigger. Practically 50% of the students in the academy is precarious workers, but this number goes until 90%. Though the most aggravated positions are those of the so-called third state countries. These are students that are not part of the European Union. Their lives is heavy. They have to have money on a bank account for getting a visa. They are part of the administration of the state, and this administration, it's like a rope around their neck. It's a grip, a clinch. So it seems we talk so much about the autonomous position of the institution of art, the academies and so on, but more and more is becoming clear that the neoliberal global capitalist states in the European Union, the police and state administration are those who decide who can study, because they give the visas, they give the permits, and so on. So the first question that is being key for the reformation of the academies, art, university, is the question of autonomy. Paradoxically, it's coming before what is called knowledge production. And this autonomy is so important that in the Occident we see big changes in the last period. So on November 13, 2020, directors of several institutions of art in Austria, also from the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna, wrote a letter to the Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research, because rumors are all around that the new amendments of the university law in Austria will take under huge control the Senate. The Senate of universities and academies is the most important parliamentary body. The power will be given instead to the Senate, to rectorate, but even more to some university councils. The university councils are actually political bodies. Representatives of the political parties in power are inside, and this means the autonomy of the institution of art, something that was the sign of the open society in the West, is under big suppression. But these are only some of the changes in this letter. Others are connected with the speed up study that is now or will be imposed on the students. To finish as soon as possible, to start to work, but where? And also to pay tax. So all this is going on in the time of the corona situation, and this prevents a big exchange of opinions, a public discussion, and so on. So we see how the corona is actually working with restructuring of the place of the institution of art and academies. What is with this virus? Daniela Mayer, an anthropologist that worked intensively with us in the past, wrote me a mail and stated, a virus, it's a very neoliberal one, free circulation of goods and money, but a total restriction of human movement. The transfer of tax money towards enterprises and companies, isolation of people at home, and so on. This was in March 2020. And then the Academy decided to open a special project program to get some points for those who will be active, helping in the time of coronavirus, engaging on social platforms, helping the community, helping the neighbor. A very good move. Another student, Henry Denise, wrote a small report. She stated, 2020, the summer semester, was the stolen year. The whole world has come to a standstill, and the reason is the pandemic COVID-19. All of a sudden, it seems like humanity, touching, hugging, talking, kindness, partying, all the good stuff, affiliated with socializing, has come to an end. And every form of discrimination became the order of the day. She said, I have to take care of the community of the Afro Rainbow Austria that she is chairing. And also, for her it's important to draw and help the community. Consequences of the pandemic on our very vulnerable community are, she states, job loss, depression, homelessness, and the standstill of asylum procedures, to name some. Therefore, we see that all what was said until now is actually interventions on the institution of art, and also have big consequences for what is called production, distribution, and institutionalization of knowledge. It seems that is a task today by neoliberal global capitalism to change and transform universities and academies into managerial institutions that will produce skilled students. The final point of this is to practically make a pressure on the public institution to change the public institution and also to make them kind of an apolitical institutions for just technological skill and agency. Also, the demand is to just finish as soon as possible the study and in a certain way to suppress the autonomy. Already more than 10 years ago, a scholar, Kirsten Folkert, when it was very actual to talk about the Bologna program, wrote the following. She made remarks on the contradictions of post-studio practices concerning the academy in the present political climate. We of course invited Kirsten Folkert to come to Vienna from Canada because we named ourselves post-conceptual art practices, and she was writing about post-studio practices. She said, the changes that are taking part have to do a lot with art commodity value, as well as with the role of the artist concerning another figure, the white collar. This is a kind of a professional, and artist, this is the idea, should be something very similar, but they are both symptom and response to certain political and economic shifts. What this means? At that point, we didn't know, but it came very clear. Financialization, administrative taking off the autonomy, skills and productivity. So what we do? What is our plan? The post-conceptual art practices department actually is a studio, works with a contextualization of art, and this contextualization cannot go differently than with theory and reflection. How actually theory and critical practice contaminate art practices with the social and vice versa. And again, I have to quote Kirsten Folkert, because she was the one who were envisioning the changes that we are facing today. I quote, post-studio practices challenge the assumption that art is about technical virtuosity or mute creative expression, and that what happens in the studio or classroom is separate from the rest of our lives. Certain aspects of post-studio practice also question the artist's definition as romantic, heroic individual, also imagined as white and male, one who does not consider the political or economic context of his work. On the other hand, how much do post-studio practices, as they are taught within the academy, really challenge conventional definitions of authorship or signature style? So, what could be some points for the future that we apply and work on in the present? Activism, politics, and theory are the most important for practices and politics of representation. Theory is not an old academic theory that suffocates the art practice, but a contemporary theoretical and critical thinking that helps students to develop processes for conceptualization of fine arts and the politics of the world in many different layers. Also, the idea is to keep the bridge between media and technology, but not only film, photo, video, but also social platforms, in order to develop politically and socially engaged art that can intervene in a wider context. Art is not a tool that can be simply applied for a certain innocent process of production and distribution of images and knowledge. Education is not a transparent machine for production and circulation of skills. So we are aware of this. We also published some books as a process of communal work that is one of the most important points. The first book we published in 2005-06, it was on anti-Semitism. The second was on feminism. The third that came out in 2013 has a subtitle, The Vocabulary of Decoloniality, and it puts at its central point social and political antagonism, what this means, how we forms our epistemologies to take into account past colonialism and present forms of coloniality, and to focus on anti-racism and new political figure, the migrant. Nobody talks about the migrants in these days. But also to, in a certain way, reflect on the invigorated anti-Semitism and see how all these processes of racialization and rationalization affect knowledge. So to summarize, 1. What is necessary to be done? Definitely is to rethink Western democracy and imperialism, colonialism in relations to the knowledge that we produce. The outcome of this is a program of anti-racist policy, questioning the regime of supremacist whiteness or the regime of whiteness as such, as regime of power that has only one line of time. But time is not white. Time is colorful. Then is, of course, the consequent criticism of rising anti-Semitism and other forms of racism, but also thinking about fascism and the role of art in all this. Art lost its central potential as it was in the 70s. Today, science, biotechnology, computers are those who redirects, or as Louis Althusser will say, over-determine what matters in the society. Still, art has a power, cannot be just an anthropological machine, something only about affect, but can use its potential for critical discourses, reformulating memories and histories, open a space for activist engagement, and formats of art that we cannot name now as art, but soon maybe this will be the space where we will have a chance to do this. That means also developing artistic practices with trans feminist and migrant queer positions. So again, not one line of knowledge, but actually a pluriversal horizon of knowledge that will also embrace other formats of practices and also other formats of knowledges. Final projects as research that will work on community-based works and also on intensive exchange with other communities outside of the institution of art.
Thank you, Marina Grznic. And the next contribution comes from Anna Collin, who is a curator, educator, and researcher who lives in the southeast coast of England, where she co-founded and directs independent art school called Open School East in Margate since 2013. So it's an example of one of these grassroots new art schools that were initiated and are growing up actually, and Anna will tell you very precisely how it functions, how she proceeds. In parallel, Anna is a PhD candidate in the School of Geography at the University of Nottingham, where she is working under the title "What Makes an Alternative Space?" A conceptual, organizational and physical exploration of alternative learning, social and art centers in the UK, 1884 till 2022. Anna was associate curator at Lafayette Anticipation in Paris from 2014 till 2020. She was associate director of Beton Salon Center for Art and Research in Paris from 2011-2012. She was curator at Gasworks London 2007 till 2010 and programmer for Resonance, a British, London-based radio broadcasting. Anna was co-curator with Lydia Ye and of British Art Show 8 in Leeds, Edinburgh, Norwich and Southampton in 2015 and 2016. So please, Anna, actually she apologized, she couldn't join us today in the discussion, unfortunately. So please, can we show her contribution?
Hello, my name is Anna Collin. I am the co-founder of Open School East in Margate in the UK and the current director. So first I'd like to thank Tomasz Vanek and Vita Vranek for their invitation to take part in this collective reflection on the future and the present of art education. In 2013, we co-founded Open School East in London, and in 2017, we moved the organization to Margate, which is a seaside town in the southeast of England. We define Open School East as a free, independent art school and as a community space that focuses on collective learning through the arts. Free is important in the UK, where a single year in higher education costs an English or European student £9,000 a year, which equates to about 10,000 euros a year. And for an overseas student, it costs about 30,000 euros a year. And the term independent, which we also use to define the school, relates to the fact that we are not affiliated to any particular university, academy, or institute, although we have collaborated with many of them in the past. Open School East runs a variety of programs. The first one we created in 2013 is what we call the Associates Program. It's a year-long, it's a development program which is studio and tuition-based. It is non-accredited and it welcomes a group of about 13 artists every year from various disciplines. Some of them have undergone formal training and others haven't got prior qualifications. Some of them have been to art school before and some of them have come from, say, communication design, textile, theatre, set design, dance, anthropology, etc. The way it works is that the associates apply and they are selected according to a range of criteria, which includes quality of ideas and forms, a recognized need to access free and informal education, an interest in being part of a group of people with different practices and experiences, a willingness to work in collaboration as well as individually, to be self-directed, and to interact with members of the public at different moments. So we'll go back to this program more shortly in detail because it's the one that is most relevant to this symposium. But I really want to introduce the rest of the organization as no program functions fully independently from the other. And Open School East is not just a typical small-scale art school, it's an organism, one that is inhabited and participated by a wide range of learners and users from varied generations and walks of life. And they come to the school whether to learn, to skill share, to develop their practice, to gain qualifications, build their confidence, socialize, or even debate with others. So as I said, the Associates Program is our first program. The second main program is what we call the Young Associates Program, and it was started in 2019. It was in the making for about 2-3 years. And it's an art and design program complete with functional skills in English and math, which replaces the last 2 years of school for young people aged 16 to 18. These are people who have been failed by mainstream education, who did not fit in for all sorts of reasons and have slipped through the net. Unlike the first program, this one is accredited and it allows the young people to re-engage with their education and to go to university after, equipped with qualifications, if they desire to do so, of course. This program, like the first one, is led by a group of international artists, as well as architects, textile, graphic, and fashion designers who work in conjunction, in this case, with qualified teachers. The third program we run is a weekly art school for children aged 5 to 11 who lack opportunities to engage in culture and art making due to limited or absent provision in their school, but also due to socioeconomic disadvantage, i.e. not having access to after-school clubs or paid opportunities to learn how to make art. Any other factors that would exclude them from civic life, essentially. And at this stage, I think it's important to say that the town we work in, Margate, is marked by significant social and economic deprivation, with high levels of poverty and unemployment and low educational attainment. So part of our programs, especially with children and young people, have been developed in direct response to the local situation and to the needs surrounding education and social inclusion. Our final program, which we simply call the public program, opens the school out to members of the public from the local area as well as from further afield. It includes skills-based workshops led by artists who are often invited at the initiative of those who undertake the Associates program. It also includes cultural theory seminars that we host in collaboration with research groups and academic institutes. At the moment, we are collaborating with the Centre for Critical Thought at the University of Kent in Canterbury, which is half an hour from Margate. We also organize, as part of our public program, medium and long-term participatory art projects, which are led variously by international artists as well as artists from the region. And these projects place the development of creative skills at the center, and they engage participation from groups that are often excluded from cultural life, including senior citizens or people with learning disabilities. These projects, like many of our programs, make use of art as a pedagogical tool, a vehicle for cross-community encounters, for skills development, for confidence building. So this is a broad introduction to what Open Schoolist is. And in a nutshell, it's an alternative art school and a locally responsive cultural and learning facility, which is run informally and according to principles of collaboration, co-production, responsiveness, and openness. Now I want to respond to some of the questions that were posed in the original invitation. Open Schoolist, unlike many but not all of the institutions and schools which have been invited as part of this symposium, is a very young and independent institution which sits partly outside of the education sector, and for that reason it has been able to model its pedagogical methods as it intended rather than in compliance with a set of more rigid criteria. Open Schoolist was primarily set up in response to the crisis faced by art education in England. So we have seen that fees are really high. So is the student debt, which makes arts education and its promises of a rather precarious future increasingly inaccessible to those who are less advantaged from a socioeconomic perspective. The other factor that we observed is that the critical resistance space that universities and art school had once been has been rather briskly repressed by the marketization of education. Finally, London's art schools, and I just want to remind you that we were started in London originally, London art schools have become increasingly connected to the art market, which has had the dual effect of discouraging social practice and its largely process rather than product-oriented approach. And it's also had the effect of generating competition for attention from the private gallery sector between students. So Open Schoolist started with a reformist agenda and embraced from the outset alternative education principles, which in a nutshell reside in collective, democratic, non-competitive learning, self-direction, agency and implication of learners in decision-making processes, critical thinking, and last but not least, a situated approach, which places learners in situations that directly connect to their experiences and strive to give these experiences visibility. So this last aspect is something that relates more to the work that we do with the young people. I won't have so much the opportunity to touch on it in the short space we have been given. In the UK, many art schools are still very much run according to disciplinary categorizations. For example, a student in sculpture will often be discouraged to engage with performance, and a painting student will be expected to largely stick to this medium. The independent setup of Open School East has allowed for a much more open approach, where we make no distinction between disciplines, where crucially the artists who undertake the Associates program are entirely in charge of programming the second and the third terms of their education, and to invite anyone that inspires them. So we give them a budget, we give them guidelines, and we give them carte blanche. And they might be inviting an artist, a fiction writer, a philosopher, an urbanist, a housing activist, a landscape designer, whatever they see fit really for their learning and for what they might want to come across with culturally and artistically or beyond. The first term is programmed by the team, who invites every year a different artist, or in the large sense of the term really, to develop a curriculum, which leads to the development of a collaborative project between the associates and the guest artists. So, for example, next year we will be working with Assemble, the architecture collective, around the idea of care and maintenance, stewardship and sustainability. So Assemble's curriculum will question how we can begin to participate in an ongoing, caring relationship with the artists with whom we share the space today, but also those that will follow tomorrow. The curriculum will engage testing changes to the material fabric of the building that we have recently moved into, to observe how a culture of repair inscribes the social and political culture at the center of a school which is built on relationships rather than objects. So throughout the year, the associates are also guided by a faculty of mentors, artists, again, broadly speaking, curators, theorists, whom we invite to work with the school on a yearly basis to accompany the associates in their practice, in the production of work and projects that they realize, sometimes individually, sometimes collaboratively, and which will end up being showcased up as part of an open studio halfway through the year and as part of an end of the year exhibition. So the Associates program establishes that there should be a mixture of skills-based activities, for instance, workshops and short courses, which are not just aimed at the associates, but also members of the public, so that more people can benefit from this education. And in the past, these courses have been geared towards analog film practice, ceramics, coding, animation, to name just a few. And on the other hand, we have theory-based activities, for example, seminars and reading groups, again, some of which, and sometimes all of them, are open to the public. So that there's more participation to this, access and, more participation and access to this education, but also the interest is in opening up a dialogue, opening up a school, and, also enabling a confrontation with civil society, with, other people who come to school for different reasons. So as such, there's no particular instruction that the school emphasizes on, and that's in response to one of the questions that was asked in the original brief for this symposium. So we could say, even though I will argue it's not that easy, that Open School East Associates program may be one possible model of what art education could look like in future should formal art education undergo widespread reform. And I'm talking really in the UK context because it's very specific. So the Associates program and Open School East, in comparison with, say, an MA program, is arguably more inclusive, more interdisciplinary, more public-oriented, which has the effect of placing artists in the real world and outside the confines of the art school. And the associates are named associates rather than students because they are co-producers of their program, and also they are decision makers, not just at the level of programming part of their education, but also at organizational level. So, for example, we meet weekly with the associates and staff to review teaching and mentoring sessions, but we also discuss, or it's really a platform for the associates to discuss, for instance, who the associates-led public program is for, how Open Schoolies could make itself more visible to the outside, how it should respond to subjects like Black Lives Matter and other such organizational topics that would normally not involve the students. And the agenda is set by the associates who, for many but not all, and this without any request or expectation from the staff, see their role at OSC, or Open Schoolies as we call it short, so they see their role at Open Schoolies as beyond learning and sharing their learning with others, but also they actively seek to reform their program and by proxy the organization. And not so much at the request of the associates, but after a few years of observing and hearing the associates asking to be made privy to how the organization works at management level, at senior level, at board level, what is the funding and the financial structure? These were questions that we asked a lot in the first year and made really public. And then after the second year, we tried to shield the associates from that set of interrogations. But many of them have asked to be made private to this conversation. So since 2016, we invite one associate to sit at each quarterly board meeting with the trustees and the staff to observe and to participate, to gain insight into the organization and its financial workings, and to give their views on programming and organizational aspects. And the feedback is not only valued, but it also shapes, sometimes in really strong ways, the current and future program, as well as other aspects of the organizations. I'm going to conclude with a set of considerations on accreditation. So just to remind you, the Associates program, the program for adult artists, is non-accredited. So it doesn't have diploma, it doesn't have assessments, it's not accredited. So in an article on free, as in non-fee paying and democratic education, the curator and theorist Irit Rogoff calls for what she calls unframed knowledge. Unframed knowledge is, in other words, knowledge that is not framed by thematic and disciplinary orders, but is instead presented in relation to the pressures and struggles of contemporaneity. Rogoff asked two key questions. What are the institutional implications of housing knowledge that is free? And what are the economies of free that might prove an alternative to the market and outcome-based and comparison-driven economies of institutionally structured knowledge at present? That's quite a heavy question. The free and framed knowledge that Irit Rogoff refers to in the UK context is, I would argue, more comfortably housed in an environment that is unaccredited. Because the moment you set up an accreditation system, you have to meet a number of outcomes and targets. But having a non-accredited program also opens a can of worms, because if unframed knowledge can be personally and intellectually fulfilling, its professional usefulness is, however, much less certain, which begs the following question: who can genuinely afford to unlearn without a diploma at the end of the journey? Those with time in their hands, those who already have a valid qualification, those with non-vocational aspirations, or those with the determination to learn and grow outside of the establishment, which is a choice which not everyone can make. Discussions on whether or not to accredit the associates program took place on a very regular basis for the first 3 years of Open School East. Accrediting the program would have meant drastically changing both its format and its approach. And it would have also excluded those who come to Open School East without prior qualifications. Ultimately, the associates program is a complement to formal education. Some people even call it a residency or development opportunity, but we could say it's not, or I would say it's not an alternative to an MA program. The group and its activities are to a large extent self-organized, and much of what takes place in the program is also shared with other beneficiaries, thereby constantly stretching the classroom walls, just to name a few of the key points of convergence between the functionings of Open School East and of a formal art school. I'd like to finish with a final word on the pandemic, because we can't avoid talking about it, given that the symposium has been brought online for that reason, and how the pandemic has affected the delivery of education, but in particular art education. So like many other art schools, Open School East relocated its programs online during the first wave of the pandemic. And sadly, as of next week, we will be returning online as the second wave is hitting the UK rather hard. So we have learned a lot along the way, not only in terms of technology, but also on how to deliver theoretical content, which is easy enough. That's the easy part. Theoretical content mentoring is the easy part, but how to deliver skills-oriented workshops and courses in a way that's engaging, and that's not too exhausting. We all we all talk about, Zoom fatigue and how this is affecting also the mental health of the students and the learners. And on that note, we are also learning to develop adequate responses to the increased emotional needs of all our learners in this really doomed moment. So going online has shown a possible way forward, one in which more learners from other parts of the world or with impaired mobility could take part in a program that's been largely out of reach for reasons of physical accessibility, or in light of the fact that, for example, as an independent art school, we cannot provide student visas. So there's much work and reflection to do in order to develop that kind of remote learning and to kind of advance it, bring it forward into the future in a more holistic way. And partnerships to put in place as well with the other art schools so that we can pool together resources and knowledge and continue to enable cross-cultural encounters at an age where traveling has been largely put on hold and could continue for a while. So I'm going to end here and thank you.
So Anna Colin contribution brought on the table, I think, two very interesting, important questions towards classical academies. The first one was how she phrased it very nicely: who can afford to unlearn without a diploma? And the second one would be the question of inclusion and inclusivity and exclusivity of academic artistic education. The next contribution comes from Jakarta, Indonesia, from two founders of Forum Lenteng, the first Hafiz Rankayale and Otividasari. Hafiz Rankayale was born in 1971 and graduated from Fine Arts University at Jakarta Institute of Arts, EKJ, and he graduated in 1994. He's an artist, curator of Forum Lenteng and Ruang Grupa. He's editor-in-chief of journal footage.net. He's also artistic director of OK Video, Jakarta International Video Festival. And since 2013, Hafiz is the artistic director of Archipel, which is a festival of experimental and documentary film and video. Otividasari was born in 1973 and graduated from Fine Arts at Jakarta, IKJ, from the same school as Hafiz. She studied journalistic at Institute of Social and Political Science in Jakarta. She's an artist, writer, filmmaker, and one of the founders of Forum Lenteng. She's also program director of Akumasa and editor-in-chief of akumasa.org and suji.id. One technical thing, we have a lot of also material that the contributions and the contributors bring, so we will share the materials, links, and the links to the activities that all of you brought online while the contributions will be put on archive. So please now Forum Lenteng contribution.
Nama saya Hafiz. Saya akan bicara di sini bersama Oti Widasari, salah satu pendiri Forum Lenteng. Forum Lenteng kami dirikan tahun 2003 sebagai ruang belajar bersama tentang seni dan media. Niatan kami untuk membuka ruang belajar itu adalah sebagai respon terhadap situasi terutama Jakarta dan Indonesia pada umumnya waktu itu pasca reformasi.
Rezim yang diktator sebelumnya sudah runtuh. Jadi, tapi kita merespon situasi di mana kita punya masalah dengan keterbatasan pengetahuan tentang media. Dengan Hafiz yang berlatar belakang dengan peminatan seni dan video, dan saya yang berlatar belakang jurnalistik, kami membangun Forum Lenteng sebagai sebuah tempat belajar bagi orang-orang yang punya minat terhadap pengetahuan. Bidang-bidang seperti dokumenter, jurnalistik, atau seni dan media itu sendiri adalah cuma sebuah metode untuk bagaimana kita mendekatkan diri pada pengetahuan yang selama ini kita kekurangan. Saya sendiri berfokus pada satu program yang dinamakan Akumasa. Program Akumasa itu adalah sebuah program tentang literasi media. Jadi kami dan dengan bersama jaringan-jaringan kami yang lainnya di berbagai kota di Indonesia, kami sama-sama meliterasi diri tentang apa itu media. Program Akumasa ini sendiri punya gerakan yang bertujuan untuk mengcounter situasi konglomerasi media tersebut dengan cara memproduksi informasi pakai perspektif orang biasa. Dalam program Akumasa itu kami memproduksi informasi dengan menggunakan video, teks, image, dan sebagainya yang bisa diproduksi oleh siapapun. Kami sama-sama merekam kelokalan dan merekam semua isu-isu yang ada di lokal yang selama ini tidak tercover oleh media massa mainstream. Dari program tersebut kami juga mengembangkan pusat data tentang pengarsipan, tentang database yang selama ini memang tidak ada secara komprehensif di Indonesia.
Ada suatu keinginan untuk memberi ruang, mulai mengkritisi bagaimana kerja-kerja media dan bagaimana seni di dalam arus perubahan yang sangat dinamik pada waktu itu tahun 2003 setelah reformasi. Forum ini dimulai sebagai kelompok belajar karena para anggotanya mayoritas adalah mahasiswa komunikasi pada waktu itu, jadi kami banyak diskusi tentang persoalan sosiopolitik dan bagaimana media bekerja di waktu itu. Karena saya berlatar belakang seni dan punya minat kepada film, diskusinya menjadi terbuka menjadi lintas disiplin yang memasukkan unsur seni dan film sebagai medium diskusinya, medium studi kasusnya gitu. Metode belajar yang kami lakukan adalah belajar secara guyup istilahnya, atau belajar bersama, yang konsepnya lebih berbagi. Bagaimana berbagi pengalaman dalam aspek teoritik, kemudian aspek-aspek sejarah dan teoritik itu diimbangi dengan metode-metode yang eksperimentatif gitu. Eksperimentif itu macam-macam, menggunakan film, menggunakan teknik dalam seni rupa misalnya drawing, kemudian juga kepenulisan, berpameran, dan performance dan sebagainya.
Metode kerja di Forum Lenteng dilakukan dengan cara membuka kelas-kelas yang diadakan secara gratis, di mana partisipannya cuma dituntut untuk memberikan waktu dan intensitas dirinya untuk belajar bersama. Hal ini penting untuk misi kita yang di awal, bahwa kita harus mendekatkan diri dengan pengetahuan, membahas soal akses terhadap pengetahuan. Maka kelas gratis memang harus dilakukan.
Kenapa gratis? Karena pendidikan seni dan media itu mahal di Indonesia. Buat kami membuka ruang bagi para partisipan untuk belajar secara cuma-cuma, dan yang kami minta dari mereka hanya membayar dengan waktu. Buat kami jauh lebih fair, karena dia diharapkan juga akan melakukan hal yang sama. Karena bagi kami akses terhadap pengetahuan ini penting, dan nantinya kami berharap mereka menjadi agen-agen yang akan juga mengamplifying metode belajar ini di berbagai tempat gitu. Keuntungan dari belajar bersama secara gratis ini adalah bagaimana kawan-kawan atau para partisipan itu menjadi jauh lebih merasa memiliki ruang ini, jadi forum ini. Jadi kalau kita menyebut sekarang ini sebagai kolektif, ada semacam passion yang sangat tinggi terhadap kolektifnya gitu, Forum Lenteng, karena bagi mereka ruang ini harus tetap dijaga sebagai ruang belajar yang memberikan pengalaman dan yang tiap tahun pasti berbeda gitu. Ada kelas yang memang secara intens belajar tentang bagaimana craftsmanship dan melihat visual itu dengan jauh lebih lebih ketat. Tapi juga ada kelas yang sifatnya mencoba menguji konsep-konsep. Gitu. Dalam kelas-kelas itu kita biasanya mencoba mencari temuan-temuan tata bahasa yang bisa disaling mengerti gitu, dan itulah perlu intensitas belajar bersama. Dalam perkembangannya kelas-kelas itu juga ada kelas-kelas yang akhirnya dibuka lagi, kelas eksperimental, kelas performance, studi tentang sejarah film, studi tentang estetika film. Itu menjadi saling terhubung semuanya dari aspek-aspek pengetahuan dasar yang tadi diajarkan di dalam pelajaran yang intens itu gitu. Belajar di forum ini bukan untuk mendidik para partisipannya untuk menjadi seniman. Kami melihat bahwa pengetahuan seni, pengetahuan media itu sebagai pengetahuan yang melengkapi dari aspek-aspek pengetahuan yang sudah menjadi modal dari para partisipannya. Karena kalau dilihat sekarang para partisipan di Forum Lenteng itu dari latar belakang yang berbeda-beda. Ada yang dari seni, ada yang dari filsafat, ada yang dari komunikasi, ada yang dari politik, dan juga bahkan ekonomi. Buat kami praktek-praktek yang kami kerjakan bersama-sama dengan medium-medium seni seperti film, seni rupa, video dan sebagainya, itu hanya sebagai bagian dari pengetahuan gitu. Ketika ditindaklanjutnya para partisipan itu memutuskan menjadi seniman, menjadi kurator, jadi penulis, itu sudah sesuai dengan minat dia gitu.
Organisasi ini didirikan untuk membangun kritisisme di dalam masyarakat terhadap isu apapun yang selama ini terpusatkan. Metode belajar yang kami lakukan di dalam kelas-kelas di Forum Lenteng dilakukan dengan cara yang sangat organik. Terutama dari saya sendiri, metode yang saya lakukan adalah dengan cara memahami isu sosial yang dimulai dengan memahami isu sosial yang sangat dekat dengan diri kita sendiri. Pemahaman yang dimasukkan di dalam tiap kelas itu bagi saya adalah kesadaran untuk mengetahui segala sesuatu yang berkaitan dengan media, seni atau film dengan cara yang lebih puitik, bukan dengan cara yang terstruktur yang seperti selama ini kita ketahui dalam metode belajar di sekolah-sekolah. Pendekatan yang paling saya gunakan dalam sebuah kelas adalah dengan cara individual.
Di kelas-kelas yang saya buka untuk para partisipan di Forum Lenteng itu biasanya saya metode belajarnya sangat struktural gitu, terstruktur, karena ini sebagai modal dasar untuk menyamakan bagaimana bahasa-bahasa visual atau bahasa film ataupun bahasa yang diproduksi dalam konteks dunia seni atau media itu menjadi bahasa yang secara kosakatanya sama. Jadi untuk masuk ke ranah konsep, ranah eksperimentasi, bagi para partisipan itu sudah tidak kendala lagi setelah mereka melewati itu. Dengan cara mengalami secara struktural, setiap partisipan punya punya logikanya untuk berargumen, mengkritik dan sebagainya.
Saya punya metode mengajar yang cukup berbeda. Saya mengoordinasi sebuah kelas yang saya kasih nama Roman Picisan. Dalam kelas itu kami sama-sama belajar tentang apa itu hal-hal remeh. Bagaimana kita melihat puisi dalam kehidupan, dan dari memahami hal-hal kecil tersebut kita akan bisa mengerti secara detail apa yang ada di dalam sesuatu yang terstruktur.
Melatih tiap-tiap partisipannya untuk berargumentasi, saling mengkritik dan berargumentasi. Ini salah satu metode belajar yang mungkin menjadi salah satu yang khas dari Forum Lenteng, karena setiap partisipan punya otoritas untuk mengkritik karya partisipan yang lain.
Dalam kelas-kelas kami, hal yang paling penting untuk dipahami oleh partisipannya adalah tidak ada yang instan. Semua harus dilakukan dengan cara yang sangat intensif, walaupun dia membutuhkan waktu yang cukup panjang. Ini penting buat saya terutama untuk menjadikan semua dari kita sebagai orang-orang yang profesional, yang siap dalam dunia kerja atau apapun untuk memahami dunia dan kehidupan. Hal-hal yang paling saya tekankan dalam setiap kelas-kelas saya adalah menulis dan mengkaji dengan cara yang tidak harus selalu sama dengan cara yang sudah pernah ada di dunia akademik. Tapi semua orang punya semacam kewajiban untuk menuliskan tentang apapun. Pengujian dari apa yang sudah pernah dipelajari dalam seluruh kelas di Forum Lenteng selama 17 tahun adalah dengan praktek-praktek di lapangan. Seperti pameran, itu semua disesuaikan oleh minat dari semua partisipan. Menjadi kurator atau menguratori proyek-proyek yang kita hasilkan. Kemudian juga dalam bentuk festival. Kami punya sebuah festival film, dokumenter dan eksperimental film festival yang bernama Archipel, yang kita mulai sejak tahun 2013. Archipel sendiri mulai diadakan setelah Forum Lenteng berusia 10 tahun. Itu menunjukkan bahwa untuk membicarakan sebuah festival film, untuk menggaungkan apa makna dari produksi, dari konten, dan dari distribusi sebuah film, kami perlu melakukan penelitiannya selama 10 tahun.
Untuk bergabung di Forum Lenteng, para partisipan di sini punya syarat, yaitu mereka harus punya minat kepada sinema dan film. Ini syarat yang penting buat kami karena buat kami sinema menjadi unsur yang sangat penting dalam melihat peradaban.
Untuk mendirikan sebuah organisasi yang bisa cukup bertahan dan semakin kuat setiap tahunnya, dibutuhkan kesadaran semacam seperti membangun sebuah keluarga dan membesarkan seorang anak. Dah.
Thank you to Forum Lenteng. It was very optimistic ending. The next contribution is, and the last one is from János Sugar from Budapest, Hungary, who studied in the Department of Sculpture at the Hungarian Academy of Fine Arts in Budapest. During his studies in 1980s, he was actively involved in the exhibitions and performances of Indigo, an interdisciplinary art group led by Miklos Erdély. I think Miklos Erdély would be also a very inspirational figure in art education. There was a book, small book published by Transit in Hungary that really deplores his amazing and very artistic approaches to art education. Sugar has participated in national and international exhibitions since mid-1980s. In 1992, he exhibited a Documenta 9 in Kassel, 96 in Manifesta 1 in Rotterdam. He completed ArtsLink residency at the Cleveland Institute of Art in 1994, and he got a 3 months fellowship at 1999 at Experimental Intermedia in New York. His films were screened in the Anthology Film Archives in New York, as example, as one of the places. He resides in Budapest. Between 1990 and 1995, he was board member of the Balázs Béla Film Studio in Budapest, which was again a very amazing archive and production unit of experimental film in Hungary. In 1994 and 1996, Sugar organized the Metaforum conference series with Gert Loving and Diana McCarthy. In 1990, he founded with Miklos Peternák the Intermedia Department of the Hungarian Academy of Fine Arts Budapest, and he has been teaching art and media theory since 1990s. So please, now we will show the last contribution, and I hope to see you next week at the same time, Thursday at 4 o'clock, and I hope it will go technically more smoothly at the beginning that it was today. We will be more experienced, and we will start sharply at 4 o'clock, I hope. Thank you for your attention.
Hello everyone. I take off my face mask. I just wanted to show you, this is the object of our time. This is my mask. Stay free, remain free. It's written on it. So thank you for inviting me, and it's a very special situation because normally a conference is partly a pretext just for coming together and having real-time encounters, small talk, cafes, cigarettes, everything, and this is equally important part of a conference. Now, in a new situation, we had to deconstruct this situation, like many other situations of our everyday and professional life. So deconstruction has a new meaning in our time. My name is János Sugar. I'm an artist, and I'm teaching at the Art University. I'm mentioning this because it's important to define the very beginning if I'm talking from this position, because I have this experience at the university experience. With other terms, I'm representing, not alone here in this circle, the so-called academic artist education. It's a rather bureaucratic term. It's a completely bureaucratic language. I don't really like it, because I think this bureaucracy invaded our everyday language. But anyway, this is it. And if I need to give a title to this talk, to my contribution, here is my title. As you see, it's a slightly changed version of the general title of the conference. Reforming the formed, reforming which was already formed. And in this context, what was formed is this academic situation, and we have to find ways how to reform it in an era, in a time where both terms, academy, university, and art education, are very problematic, and they are questioned in many different ways in everywhere. The academy is questioned in general, like science, professional science is questioned in many ways. We live in a so-called post-truth, post-factual era, and in such a setup, the academic freedom, the autonomy of universities are not really welcomed, or at least questioned everywhere. And we face the same problem somehow concerning art, because our modernistic art notion, based on something which is which might be invisible for many. This is the growth which is the basement of the foundation of the market capitalism. If there is no growth, there is a crisis, and this notion of growth invaded our life in many sense, our relationship with each other, and in many areas. And this growth is the support of those institutions we like to keep and we rely on: museums, galleries, and art market, publications, everywhere, everything concerning art, and of course not just art. And we are in an era where multiple crises are around us. I don't have to count them, but everyone knows: financial crisis, political crisis, ecological crisis. And if we would like to survive as humanity, and if we would like to keep at least some of our best achievements, we have to change many things. We have to change our way of thinking. Especially, we have to change our thinking or our idea about growth. And it could change our notion of art. We can see some signs of it in this pandemic situation, because the businesses are not working, there is no public, there are no exhibitions, and we are desperately seeking new forms of encounter with the public. But it's not so easy, because art is primarily based on real-time encounters, real-time relationships. We can learn lots of things in books and slideshows and reproductions, but the real perception of an artwork, either either a theater piece or a visual art piece, or etc., we have to be present. We have to be there, and we have to have institutions for such encounters. At the beginning of this short talk, I mentioned my position. Going back to this, I would like to add a further element. I feel myself living and working in Hungary like being in a laboratory. What is a laboratory? A laboratory is a place where, in this definition, where some larger scale events can be researched in a small scale situation. So living in Hungary, which is one of those existing oxymorons, the so-called illiberal democracies, I feel the problems of those two above-mentioned terms in a very strong way, very everyday way. Let's speak about the academic situation. There is an ongoing process in Hungary to privatize all the universities. It could be, in itself, it doesn't have any value. Lots of universities around the world are privately founded universities, but it's a rather different concept here in Hungary. Privatization of universities doesn't mean give some or enhance the independence or the autonomy of the university, just the opposite. There is a foundation with some members above the usual heads of the universities, the deans and the rectors, and they have full power. So practically they are the real leaders, the universities. In Hungary, if my informations are right, there are 6 universities which are not yet privatized, and those are mainly the so-called art universities. Dance, music, visual art, which is ours, where I'm working. And recently, maybe you've heard about there was, or still there is, a huge protest of the students of the Theatre and Film University of Budapest, because the government changed the university's legal status privatized in such a way that without any kind of dialogue or negotiations with professors, students, other teachers of the university. And that's why the extremely brave students of the Theatre and Film Academy, they occupied the university. You can imagine it's a rather big thing in a country like Hungary. They occupied their university, and which is, from this point when I'm talking about, is even more important. They introduced something which they called Teaching Republic. Teaching Republic. I will go back to this. And by the way, I will give out some Word documents containing all the references and links about things I'm mentioning. Okay, I spoke about laboratory and academic situation, and I don't think that I have to speak too much about the situation of art in Hungary. It's another issue which follows the similar model. I don't want to go into the details because it's too complicated and it's not the topic of this talk. But I try to give you some links, or you can ask me later, of course. And I'm just mentioning that culture politics, control of art, censorship, and the worst thing, self-censorship, and the censorship of the middlemans are back in Hungary. So the big cultural institutions like museums and similar ones, they are really very much controlled, and they don't really want to show any kind of critical positions or critical art, or let's say problematic art, or something which people have to understand and think about and somehow interpret. The general attitude is just being very, very transparent and simple, and no politics, no critical position. The general question, going back to the academic situation, why do we need academic art education? It's not just a rhetorical question. It's a practical question, because if we look around, we find that all the materials, all the equipments are available for everyone. So there is not such a difference between a professional video equipment and the so-called consumer electronics. And we all know about very good movies which were made with a telephone or with a medium digital camera, etc. And plus people can find all the tutorials, all the necessary information of using those equipments on the internet, in bookstore, in libraries, everywhere. And this is the same with other areas. people can find all the necessary knowledge if they need it. This raises the question: what can we offer at an art university? If we see it in a very let's say dry way, we can say that on one hand we can offer a kind of existential safe haven. You know, nowadays the position of a student is a very safe position from the point of existence. Because in the spirit of a division of labor, a university degree could direct a kind of career path with BA, MA, DLA, etc. And of course, a university could offer high-level knowledge and professional equipments, and together a kind of a playground. And maybe the third aspect, that a university education could offer generational contacts, relationships, cooperations, and some help to the emergence. And this was a question, of course, this is the question for all of us. And I think, and it's not just an easy position, I think that we cannot give a general answer for this. I think very seriously that we can give answers just particular questions. And this is my experience, because at the beginning I mentioned that I'm teaching at the Art University of Hungary. But my teaching experience, I never wanted to teach, I never had such an ambition, I never wanted to go to the academy. I was completely happy with my artistic activity. But parallel with the political changes, which was a rather similar situation like now, in 89-90, the that time students, they started the revolt against the that time leadership of the university, and it was a longer process, and at the end they invited some new people, and I was one among us. Later, or in other situation, I can explain our daily practice. But to cut a very long and complicated story short, I would say that we did something which could be defined by that term I mentioned earlier, teaching republic. Because one of our major or most important decision was that we didn't want to follow that tradition called master classes. We don't have master classes. We have a bunch of teachers, very experienced people, and their topics and their courses, they are overlapping. So the student doesn't have to choose a master. And I think this, I would close this short contribution with this, that maybe we have to think about the possibilities of teaching republics, a new kind of academic artistic education in the time of crisis, pandemic, and political populism, because we have to defend our values, and I think art could play a very important role in this. maybe not in the traditional way, or not just the traditional way, but in different new ways. And to find those new ways, the universities, the university academic art education could be a larger laboratory. Thank you very much, and as a gesture, I take my mask.
Thanks to János Sugar to introducing this beautiful notion of teaching republic, and it was the last contribution of today. I would like to thank mainly to all participants, but the same way I would like to thank to all listeners and viewers that follow us, and I would like to remind you or invite you for the next session that will happen on Thursday at 4 o'clock, where there will be first there will be contributions by Olaf Nikolai from Academy of Fine Arts in Munich, Alexandra White, Applied Art Academy in Prague, Dimitri Vilensky, member of Čtodělec Group, who founded an art school, and Pavel Bichler, who teaches thought at Manchester School of Art, and actually now he's visiting professor at AVU in Prague. So this will be programmed for the next week. Their contributions, we will start with the contributions, and in the second round, there will be a short discussion with invited guests. Thank you, and see you next week.